Okay, hello everybody. I hope the sound is good tonight. I think it should be after a couple of mishaps. I have practiced it now. It seems to be much better. Okay, quite momentous events this week, and I think we're going into a particularly crazy period. As you will recall, a couple of months ago, I said it's going to get really intense when it comes to October, particularly to do with the financial crisis, Ukraine, and just politics in general. Everything is kind of going to be unraveling. In the next few days, I'm going to be looking at the chart of the Czech Republic because they have given their government an ultimatum until the 25th of this month to sort things out with the energy crisis, because the Czech people are losing patience with this whole Slava-Ukraine thing, and they're thinking, charity begins at home. Do we really care about this border dispute? I mean, come on, guys. It's a line in the sand. It's a border. It was only placed there by Stalin. It was not Stalin, it was Lenin after the Russian Revolution. So, there's scope for movement there, negotiation, not war. So people need to be getting to the negotiation table, but we know that governments are pushing in any direction but. And the Italian government, it looks like this lady, Georgia, is going to get the most votes, but will she be able to form a government? That's the key thing, because in Italian parliament, as with a lot of European parliaments, they have this thing where it usually ends up a hung parliament because they have so many parties, something we don't have in the UK because of first past the post. So that will be something I'll be looking at in the Italian chart. But to come back to the UK chart, as you'll know, if you watched my broadcast on the events in the UK for 2022, which I did at the beginning of the year, I said the April ingress chart for the UK looked surprisingly similar to the charts for the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution. And what happened during those revolutions? It was the end of the monarchy, but it was also a communist revolution. So I anticipated something of that flavour taking the UK by storm, right? I also said that there were great similarities to the year that the Queen had called Annus Horribilis. So I expected quite a bad year for the royal family. And I guess the death of the Queen is qualifies as a bad year. So a lot of you guys would know I thought that the Queen would probably be announced as passing on early April. Turns out what was actually happening in April is the royal families all gathered for Prince Philip's proper funeral, because he didn't have a funeral because of the lockdown period, right? And then they had the Jubilee, but I was definitely anticipating with the transit that this would be the year, that the final year of Queen Elizabeth, and that has now come to pass. What else happened in Annus Horribilis, just to go back? It was the year there was this fire at Windsor Castle, and it really devastated the Queen because lots of priceless works of art that they basically hoard there for their own benefit were destroyed. It was also the year Charles got acrimoniously divorced from Diana, Prince Andrew from Sarah Ferguson, and Anne from whichever husband she had at the time, so it wasn't a very good year for the royals. And likewise, this hasn't really been a good year, because while the Jubilee appeared, from all reports to have gone off rather well, it was also a year when various countries in the Caribbean turned on their back on the royals. William and Kate had a very unsuccessful tour to the Caribbean, after which they are further considering whether they'll go about these royal tours anymore. There's going to be a massive slimming down. The problems with Andrew Epstein and that whole saga continue to rumble. There were stories of Andrew, a BBC photographer, having such incriminating photograph of Andrew that it could bring down the whole royal family. There's been scandals with Charles in Rwanda, accepting some sort of money and accepting money from the Saudi Arabians to the point of 1.2 billion. So there's been quite a lot going on in the royals that definitely qualifies this as Annus Horribilis. Okay, so the Queen has passed on. I just find it rather strange to me. They go on. Now, I'm prepared to say there is a value in the royal family for tourism. Okay, yes, there is. I do think it contributes to the pomp and circumstance that we very much known for in the UK, and it does give a kind of original, slightly different flavour, and it kind of is a bit of Dallas at the Palace. There's a whole drama that's always going on with the royals, which keeps them in the headlines, which I guess in a way helps promote Britain. And of course, when they have these big royal events, which they do frequently for various weddings, funerals, commemorations, it does put the eyes of the entire world onto London, which I guess is fantastic for PR. It's advertising you can't buy. I mean, it's free advertising. Harry and Meghan get married, the whole world sees Windsor Castle and it looks glorious. It's free advertising, isn't it? So I'm prepared to say they're quite good for tourism. But we're moving into a world now where they don't want tourism. What's the use of tourism with the Great Reset? People aren't going to be traveling. They want to cut down on airports. So do they really need them to tourism? Yes, they're quite good for culture and for nationalism because people come out and wave their flags, but that isn't what globalists want. They want one giant melting pot where we're pretty much the same and countries are indistinguishable, so we all blur and the boundaries blur and none of us really feel this connection to language, culture and roots, so we're more easily able to be manipulated and pushed around. So you don't really need the royals for that, do you? The royals were meant to be the defenders of the faith, in this case the Church of England, Protestantism. There's a massive attack on Christianity. The church really doesn't stand for anything anymore. Christian values have been abandoned for liberal globalist values, so we don't really need them for that anymore. So what do we need them for? That's why I think this is the signal of the end of the monarchy, in effect, right? It's all started very, very well for Prince Charles. We can see people are greeting him with a lot of enthusiasm, and it all seems to be going well, as it seems to be going well for Liz Truss as well, because she's come out and said, okay, they're going to put the energy price cap there, but I believe things are going to unravel very quickly for both of them, and that's why I'm predicting a general election probably before Christmas or early next year. And the general election I'm predicting is going to involve a hung parliament. I think under Liz Truss, the Conservatives are going to continue to plummet in the polls, especially as inflation rises and people begin more and more to see the price we are paying for this conflict in Ukraine and the Green New Deal or net zero, whatever, Great Reset or whatever they're going to call it. So things I can see unraveling. The hung parliament will mean that Labour could potentially form a government with the SNP and maybe some help from the Welsh Labour and Sinn Féin, but that will be extremely unstable and will make the country virtually ungovernable, which will lead to a constitutional crisis, and that is kind of what I'm predicting. I know they keep saying, about, oh, the Queen has done so much for us. She's done so much for us. And I'm scratching my head here and thinking, someone I've never met, who's travelled the world in luxury, who's walked around dripping with the world's most extravagant and exotic jewels, who's, hobnobbed with heads of state, who's never used and had to handle cash, who's never had to worry about cooking the dinner, who's never had to be concerned about paying the bills, where the next cents come from, who's never been hungry, cold, insecure because she has such wonderful security around her, has never really had to make a decision, has never had to worry about anything, and she's done so much for me. Curious one. And also looking back at the montages of pictures, it seems that she very much enjoyed being received so wonderfully in the early days of when she was queen in New York and at the Congress in America and traveling around and just lapping up all the attention around the Commonwealth. Gee, it didn't look too bad to me. I don't see a lot that was being done for me there, but enough of that. One more question. That rang a bell because, during the first day of coverage or the first 2 days of coverage, I note there wasn't a word about religion or God, anything. It was all, she did a lot, her duty, the state, world leaders. It was all very focused. Didn't hear the word God once or religion once or Church of England, nothing about faith, anything like that until then Charles started to talk about defending the faith. So then it came into it. He was talking about his faith. But the first day in the news, nothing. Oh, by the way, I was suspicious when I saw the test match between England and South Africa was cancelled without a ball being bowled that morning. And I thought, okay, they must know the announcement's coming today. And I was hearing from various friends that they'd heard, that the demise has happened. But anyhow, that's just a by the by. Just the other question is the thing I was going to say. She sacrificed so much for us, and the immediate thing that popped in my head is, did she die on the cross? I just found it absurd in a way to be told how much she'd sacrificed, how much she'd done, when in this country, as a Protestant country, and many people are Christians or have an attachment with Christianity, when we believe that our Saviour Jesus died on the cross for our sins, and yet this woman's done a lot for us. That to me just seemed jarring and a little bit, I don't want to get all religious on you guys, but it just felt a little bit odd. So I think we are in the thralls of the great communist reset, and while Charles is very popular now, as soon as the average Joe hasn't really logged on right now that we are about to have the most monumental fall in living standards ever, because we've seen over the past well, the reign of Her Majesty, really, I suppose, the Queen. A huge increase around the Western world in particular. Definitely not that in every part of the world, I'm not saying that, but people in this country, whether they be working class, middle class, are used to quite a good standard of living. And I think that's helped the monarchy stay popular because people are still getting their holiday and their flat screen TV, they got their phones, they're fairly satisfied. But wait until people have to think, gee, can I wash my hair tonight? Should I use the blow dryer? Oh my God, I can't use the vacuum. The electricity prices, and look at the food, and they're looking at their bills, and they begin to realize with this great reset, they are being pushed very definitely till you will owe nothing and you'll be happy. They're not going to accept, and suddenly they're going to wake up and think, wait a minute, Charles is the guy pushing this. In fact, a journalist on the BBC, a friend told me, was actually saying that the Great Reset is Charles's idea, not Klaus Schwab. Well, I think it's the Rothschilds' idea, the banker's idea, but still, if Charles wants to take it upon himself, he's going to wear that like an albatross round his neck, if that's the right analogy I'm using, because that's not going to go down well when people find out the Great Reset is taking their and their children's future away in a way they never expected. It's going to take all their hopes and dreams away and having them living like they were in the Soviet Union. Be lucky to have a one baked potato a night, It's crazy. Now, while I'm still on the subject of the Queen's passing, I'd like to mention David Icke did a really good show on the rainbow flag, why they use it for the alphabet agenda, LGBTQI agenda, and how it's linked to the Noahide laws. I encourage you all to watch that. I'm not going to talk about the same things. I'm going to have a different perspective. But on the day of the funeral, of the Queen's passing, splashed on the paper was that there was a rainbow over Windsor. And coincidentally, there was a rainbow over Buckingham Palace. And I thought, really? I noticed, because for you guys watching in other countries, as soon as the announcement was made, all the music radio stations shut down and they either reverted to BBC News or LBC, where you had full-time discussion about the Queen's death. And I think the same happened on the TV stations. So you had to look at alternate media and stuff to get away from it, because it was all on you. And was in the car, so obviously it had gone to LBC, and Sheila Fogarty was saying, oh, the rainbow, and it's such a message, and all this kind of very mawkish kind of stuff going on, sentimentality going on. And I thought, interesting. Now, David Icke said the rainbow is one of these symbols that are used within the Illuminati, and they don't only use these symbols to affect you at a subconscious level, they also use these symbols to communicate with each other, right? So when they put out, say, a terrorist attack happens, maybe the number on a date like 77, and then the initiates around the world understand, okay, 77, that's something to do with a cult. So they put up the rainbow. I wondered if that rainbow over Buckingham Palace in Windsor was a message not to the public to get all sentimental and feel all good, warm and fuzzy, but to say to the Illuminati, ready, steady, go, the plan's in action. Now we're doing it. That's why I think it's all going to kick off from now on. That's why we've all been saying, and as astrologers, we've been saying things are going to get really crazy in October. What with the Saturn, the final Saturn in Aquarius square, Uranus in Taurus square, which I will say now, the last time that happened was just before Martin Luther's 95 Theses, and you know how many times I've said this era is very similar to that era. So that's kind of hopeful for us in terms of the Reformation, but it also means things are going to get really hectic all over Europe. So we've got that coming. We've got the solar eclipse conjunct Venus in Scorpio, which I think is going to make things more intense in Ukraine. So I think those rainbows were an international message to all the initiates, 33-degree Freemasons, whatever they are out there, the so-called, the powers that should not be, that it's on like Donkey Kong. The plan is rolling in. So that was my interpretation. I believe tonight, while on Sky News, they were saying Ukraine is winning, they're about to take Kharkiv, they've had a major victory, the Russians are demoralized. Well, I heard on George Galloway's show that Russia has cut the electricity to Western Ukraine and they are in darkness and have no gas. So Russia's up the ante as well. And very interesting. And I've got a couple of little things on my Getter to share. Someone had a thing on Facebook, the link's on my Getter. There was person who says it's a strange cancelling of concerts from Alassane Morissette to Justin Bieber to Foo Fighters. All sorts of bands have been cancelling their concerts for the next few months. He gives you a big list there, and as I say, it's on my Getter, the link. Just interesting that all these people are suddenly cancelling shows. You know, what is the actual reason for it? Do they know something's going to be happening? Now, when David Icke did his show on the Queen, he talks about all these protocols, like you can never offer to shake her hand, you have to wait to be offered, and you can't wear gloves, but she wears gloves, you can't put on a glove to shake her hand, kind of thing. You never touch the Queen, and if you're at a banquet, you only start eating when she started, and you stop when she finishes, blah, blah, blah. But on the show I was with Andrew on that other show, and Andrew was saying that there was quite a scandal when she visited Australia, and John Howard sort of touched her on the shoulder and gently steered her, and it was all, oh, we touched the Queen, oh, shock horror. But there's a picture that goes around with Rothschild poking Charles in the stomach. So yeah, who's controlling who, huh? Who's wearing the pants in that relationship? We wonder. Okay, I just want to see what I've written here before I go to my Getter. See if I've got any little juicy. Oh yes, very interesting. When Charles was in the room with the fountain pen signing, and William was signing something, as was Camilla, and you could see there the former prime ministers, Blair was there. Oh, he was laughing his head off. Penny Mordaunt was like solemn as anything. She was totally in character, taking it all very seriously. You know, Tony Blair was having a big laugh. Gordon Brown, John Major, Theresa May was there, and all the members of the Privy Council were there. Also Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond were there. Interesting. That's why I think this whole thing about splitting with Scotland is a bit of a hoax for everyone, because they're there and kind of participating hook, line and sinker. But the Privy Council, in the early days of the coronavirus investigation, Rainer Fulmick had on as a guest Steve Martin, and he put up a clip, and I have it somewhere, of when Justin Trudeau takes his oath of office, and he swears allegiance to the Queen of England and her Privy Council, not to the Canadian people, not to Canada, to the Queen and her Privy Council. And there in that room today with all the former prime ministers was the Privy Council. So, you know, how important is this? And, you know, you just always wonder, is this the world we don't really understand it at all, do we? And I think Harrison Smith on InfoWars was saying they've done a wonderful job of telling us the royals are only there for tourism purposes, and it's just a warm and fuzzy thing. And I always bought into that. Oh yeah, they have no real power. And well, I still don't think they actually particularly have power, but it's the people behind them that wield all the power and that control all the events. So as I say, I think it's all going to kick off very soon. Okay, guys, back again. Now, before I forget, I was also meaning to tell you, I have got it on my Getter. There was a story. Now, I wasn't able to confirm it and get a second on the story, but apparently the Vatican has instructed all its kind of branches, subsidiaries, whatever you would call it, all its assets in the world, to bring all the money back to the Vatican Bank before the 25th of September. Right, so the call went out from the Vatican. A lot of their assets are in Swiss banks, but they want everything returned to the Vatican Bank before the end of the month, particularly the 25th. So I'm very interested if that's a signal that there's going to be some kind of economic collapse, although some people say it'll be more likely the euro and the pound because the Americans are artificially keeping their dollar propped up. Just another note on Charles is what was demonstrated so well with the interview that Andrew did with Emily Maitlis is how out of touch these people are. They are so arrogant. They've never had any pushback in their life. They've never actually ever had to sit under crossfire and be put on the spot and answer questions. And when they do, they make an utter plonker of themselves, like Andrew did, although a plonker kind of belittles the seriousness of the situation. To say he was just a plonker makes it sound like it was a laugh when it was a lot more sinister than that. But this is how they've never interacted in the way the rest of us have to try and get on in this life. So they don't have the filter, the barriers, the perceptions, the emotional intelligence, right? That's why Charles is gung-ho, yeah, great reset, I'll take credit for it, it's a great idea, not for one moment anticipating the huge amount of anger, hostility, resentment this is going to fire up that could be so destructive to the fabric of society. Doesn't get it. Doesn't get that, you know, he might be the target of that anger. And look, Charles I wasn't particularly lucky, was he? And 3, Charles III, Richard III, 3 is not really a great number. So he was always going to be King George, but now he's decided, because, they don't have to take their actual name, they can take any name of a king. So he was always going to be King George, but he's decided to go with King Charles III, and I think that might be quite portentous. Okay. Hope I haven't... yes, I did say about the Vatican. I just want to go on to a couple of articles. Now, I don't know if they're going to come up on this thread. I might have to tell you about them. One of them was in The Guardian, and I'll put the link up. And came out last week. Very interesting, right? I'll just read you this little bit. Sources have told Tasneem Akunji, the lawyer representing the Shamima Begum family. You remember Shamima Begum? She was one of those 3 British schoolgirls who went out supposedly to join ISIS in fight in Syria. Now she's stuck there at a camp and she's been trying to come back. So sources have told this lady, Akunji the lawyer, that there's significant concern within its ranks that a people smuggler working for, wait for this, Canadian intelligence helped Begum and her 2 friends from Bethnal Green, East London, to join Islamic State in Syria. Until now, sources within the Canadian Security Intelligence Services have kept their counsel over the scandal, since it was revealed last week that the Met Police in London allegedly knew that a people smuggler linked to a Western security services was trafficking the 15-year-old. Another example as do we really know what the hell is going on in this world? I know the mainstream media create a narrative that's very simplified and quite easy to follow. A to B, yeah, Putin bad, bombing Ukraine, we saw, Ukraine is all very easy. No, Western security, Canadian, helping smuggle these girls to fight for ISIS. It's crazy, isn't it? But then there was another wilder story, which I doubt you've heard because it wasn't obviously in the mainstream, although George Galloway covered it, and I'm looking for it right now. This was so crazy, I didn't even know how to synopsis it. But anyhow, what it's about is there's a nuclear plant in Ukraine, which is in Russian-held territory, and I think I've mentioned it before. It's the Zaporozhye NPP nuclear plant, and the West have kind of been saying that Russia are bombing it, Russia is saying the Ukraine is shelling it, and this could kick off World War III, because if something goes down and there's a kind of Chernobyl event, the West are going to say, Russia's caused this is an Article 5 violation, it's war. And of course Russia are going to say, well, Ukraine caused it, it's a false flag, blah, blah, blah. So here's something interesting, and I'm going to bring this, finish off after this, but so UN nuclear safety officials went off to Ukraine's Zaporozhye, said that terribly, I butchered that word anyway, power plant, and it was continuing to face intense shelling, but they traveled there anyway, right? So the Kiev regime has attempted a large-scale provocation. It was undertaken on September the 1st, and it was aimed at disrupting the arrival of this mission of the IEA, the International Atomic Energy Board, at this particular plant, Zaporozhye. So a military analyst said the Ukrainian side has maintained a stubborn silence about the events that happened. I think it's necessary to link the landing attempt with the aim of capturing the nuclear plant with a visit to the power plant by the group of IAEA inspectors. I think their task was a provocation at the station to arrange chaos there, military clashes, and perhaps even kill or injure one of the representatives of the IAEA in order to subsequently blame Russia for this. It's quite possible that they were going to work under the Russians, but this is yet to be established. So the second purpose, they say, of this, now when the inspectors were at this nuclear plant, which I presume is on the Black Sea, right, there was a group of Ukrainian paramilitaries who were going to come ashore, capture the nuclear plant, hold the inspectors hostage, blah, blah, blah. So it says the second possible purpose of this Ukrainian landing was to seize the bridgehead along with the nuclear plant to put forward conditions for the representatives of the IAEA. He says perhaps it was planned to inform the inspectors that the station is the territory of Ukraine. It is allegedly under control of Kiev, and therefore the armed forces of Ukraine cannot fire at it. These are Russians. In any case, no matter what plans were made, they ended up being thwarted, fortunately, and their plans could not be implemented. So people don't really know what the plans were, so they're speculating. But the key is that this article goes on to say, so it says Kotonok, who's involved in this, talks about British planning and involvement. So he notes the Ukrainians acted strictly in accordance to the methods of the British SAS, and quite possibly British instructors were part of the landing force. I also admit, in quotes, the opinion in which it was the special forces of the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine, or the MTR, it was an extremely daring action, and those paratroopers who were blocked by the Russian military will either be captured or die. So what were these people doing? What was British intelligence concocting? Why were they training the people? What were they going to intend to do at that nuclear plant while the International Atomic Agency weapons inspectors were there? Or weapons inspectors, just atomic inspectors, to see there's nothing bad going on there in terms of what the shelling and the damage done. What are they doing? Look how strongly Britain is linked. So I'd like to end by saying, with astrology, one of the things that came up is this year is very strongly linked to the year of the scandal of the, oh, what's that guy? Profumo scandal, right? What scandal are we going to see soon that is going to bring down the British government? Because I think it's going to be linked to Ukraine. George Galloway gave this stat, and I want to repeat it. It's astonishing. This really resonated with me. So 1 million seconds is 12 days. 1 billion seconds is 32 years. So that shows you when they're sending billions to Ukraine, it's a lot of money. A lot of taxpayers' money going there. And we don't know what it's happening to it. All we can guess. It's not going for the said purposes. So I'm expecting some major scandal in the Tory party to do with corruption regarding Ukraine. And that could bring down the government. Wondering something. I mean, obviously Profumo was sex scandal involved in it as well. But we don't think it's going to go down that line totally. So very interesting to see what's going to be happening there. And remember, when Liz Truss is talking about the cap at 2,500, yes, you'll only have to pay a maximum on an average 3-bed house, average household of 2,500 a year for your electricity. But the energy companies can put their prices up as high as they like, and the government is using taxpayers' money to throw at that, right? So it's a wonderful way of diverting more taxpayer funds to private industry, which is going to find its way into the pockets of all the cronies and all the usual suspects. So again, it's another massive raid on the country's finances, just as this Ukraine war is a massive raid, because again, all this taxpayers' money is being sent over to Ukraine, and then it's finding its way into Burisma, Hunter Biden, wherever it's going, right? And then they're keeping the people stupid, like Sheila Fogarty is saying. This is a year when Britain has never been closer to Ukraine. Why? Are they going steady? You know, or did they get engaged? Is Britain going to marry Ukraine? You know, they talk about it like we're having a love affair. It's a country most people in the UK had never really thought about or heard of even until the beginning of the year. Suddenly we want to be their best friends, and we want to have terrible relations with Russia, which could lead to a dramatic fall in living standards, which of course they want for net zero. But, you know, the average person out there is just thinking, oh, it's quite cute, supporting this little country, you know, yay for the underdog, yeah, bad Putin. It's again, I said, the media feed people simplistic narratives on which they base decisions to stay passive and not to complain to the MPs and whatever. And they're all being led down the garden path of net zero, where they kind of will own nothing and not be very happy. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed that extended reading. I think there was lots of stuff packed in there and gossip. I will make sure I link to some of those articles so you can read them properly, because, look, I don't have the time to delve, and I don't just want to sit here reading stuff to you. I like to get to the point and whet your appetite. If you're interested, you look for more, don't you? And just nice chatting to you all. Hope you're all having a good weekend. And avoid mainstream media at all costs is my advice for the rest of the week.